The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Blackwater, swallow me, yeah, blackwater, swallow me. Take my worry out to sea, blackwater, swallow me. Take my worry out to sea, yeah, take my worry out to sea. Leave my flesh and bones with me, take my worry out to sea. Leave my flesh and bones with me, take my worry out to sea. Well, the shadows pass as daylight falls, it reveals the stars above. The bitter cold, it eased my pain, but it wasn't quite enough.
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 35, and our guest is author C.H. Hooks. Hooks wrote my favorite book of 2019 thus far, y'all. It's called Alligator Zoo Park Magic, and I highly recommend you go out and get it. It's a wonderful, fantastical tale. It's gorgeously written. He is such a wonderful author and such a delightful guy to talk to. C.H. Hooks stopped by the Marinade Studios on his way from Tampa to his home up in Georgia, and it was just such a delightful conversation. We went deep, and we talked about all kinds of different topics. We talked about everything from sports to Florida to love to writing to just everything in the that you could possibly want to get down with the author of your favorite book of the year about. So I'm so grateful for this episode, and I think you guys are going to dig it. The song used throughout this conversation is The Devil's Hammock by our friend Kyle Keller. Kyle is a wonderful songwriter from Georgia. He now lives in Florida, and this tune is about a very specific place in rural Florida. Well, C.H. Hooks grew up in Georgia, and his outstanding book, Alligator Zoo Park Magic, is set in rural Florida. The union of those two just made too much sense. Everyone, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. C.H. Hooks.
Now I'm sinking just like lead, and I'm getting born again. Close my eyes and hum along as the water spills into my lungs.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm good? All right.
Yeah. Cool, dude.
I like this. This is awesome.
Yeah. Well, Chris took care of this for him. Chris did most of the cool stuff in this house, including decorating this room and buying this thing for me and setting this whole thing up, which has changed. I mean, we were joking on the way when you came in about like how physical space, like what a difference it makes creatively.
Yeah.
And how your kind of work. I mean, there's a case in point. We were just
Totally.
talking about work area. And mine has got like a capo on it and like patches and an air freshener.
And a baseball. Don't forget the baseball.
And a baseball, yeah.
And a harmonica.
And a harmonica. It does have a harmonica. So, so I do write there, and I do record there. But it's like it takes like time to get to that place. But this space has made a huge difference for me.
Yeah.
I mean, the show, and I think I'm proud of everything that we've done. When I look at episode 15 on, that's about when we bought the house.
Okay.
Or right when we kind of got settled in the house.
And you're on 30.
So I just released 30.
Okay.
And then I've got 1, 2, 3. This will be the 4th one in the can.
Okay.
So yeah. Excuse me. So I fell a little bit behind just because life's been crazy, but in a good way. But yeah, so but that was about a year ago. So you see how like not even a year ago, how much it has accelerated. The show has accelerated.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of that is having this space.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I used to go out in the car and record intros because Chris works at night, and so like I get up early.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a morning person.
Me too. Totally.
Yeah, and so she'll stay up all night, and I get up early, and I'm at bed by 10.
Yep.
So I don't want to wake her. But here, I can just close the door and do whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
And that physical space makes such a big difference, you know.
Physical space makes a huge difference. It's all about having like a simple parameter, like having something that can contain the creativity. For me anyway, I need something to kind of hold it, right? So that then I can, inside of that space, go nuts. So yeah, my desk is a mess. There's art everywhere. There are 2 giant jugs of grape must from where I'm making moonshine. There's there's
that sounds like some shit Jimmy would have going on. Jimmy's the main character of his book.
That's ultimately this is the stuff that we kind of have to surround ourselves with, the things that allow our creativity to flourish.
Yeah.
Because if it's just like this completely blank open space, I feel like I couldn't know and be who I am inside of that.
Because it's overwhelming, or
it's too much.
Yeah.
It if you have this sprawled out space with none of the little trinkets or harmonicas or a baseball or those little things that kind of become like our we attach our thinking to them in some ways, like and the familiarity of having them around us.
It's funny you say that, because it reminds me of, so there's the original drawing on the desk of Chris did that. She created all the artwork for the show, and that was a concept that I sort of came up with, and then she just made way better. And then this is like her first. She makes these coasters, and this was kind of her first attempt, and it's great, it's beautiful, but it's thick, and so it's not very functional. And I had a glass of wine sitting there a few weeks ago, and I was like furiously doing something with the show, and then I just kind of like I was in this, that like in that zone where it's flowing, and so then I went to grab my glass of wine and just knocked it off of that thing all over everything, right? And so now this drawing has like wine stains on it.
I kind of like it.
It's kind of nice, isn't it? Right? And that kind
you didn't even know it was missing that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at too. Like those little. Every time I see it, it's a kind of a funny chuckle, but it's also this weird collaboration between us.
Right.
No,
totally.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but having that space and making it our own, and then being able to function and work in it, I think is super important.
Yeah.
I mean, we laugh about it. We're like, oh my God, it's such a mess. But I don't think we could do it in like I don't know, if it was pristine, it just wouldn't be the same.
Right. Yeah, there's a comfort that needs to happen, I think, to get in that headspace, for me at least.
I agree totally.
And a lot of people that I talk to, and that's a good question for you too, a lot of most people that I have on the show are musicians, and a lot of them say they don't really ride on the road. Okay. And I think a part of that, some of them do, but I would say the vast majority don't. And I think a huge part of that is the fact that it's hard to get in that space, because if you're sitting at a hotel desk, for a lot of people, or at some random cafe that you're not familiar with, that's different from being in a place where you have the comfort.
Yeah.
Is that true for you too, or are you able
It's
to?
that home field advantage.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I can edit on the road,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing that while I've been on the road quite a bit.
Mm.
If I'm gonna be somewhere for like a week or so, then I'll find a space where I can start to get writing done. Just because, for me, as a writer, it's something that I have to do kind of consistently.
Right.
But I do agree with that. Even if it's just my own couch, you know, I do feel like I can write better there than if I'm at a hotel desk. A hotel desk is just, it's like you said, it's unfamiliar space. It's cold.
Sterile.
Yeah, totally. The lighting is off. You know, you get used to these different things, and your body interacts with like the specific lighting to your space, and your just the feel of your own chair and things like that. Like even where you set your arms whenever you're working on something.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I notice that if I don't have that exact, I'll put off. Not because I'm a procrastinator. I'm really not. I'm not one of those like Joe Pug's podcast, The Working Songwriter. The intro, he always says something to the effect of, "This show is what every writer craves the most, an ironclad excuse to actually put off writing or to put off actual writing." And I don't feel that way. Like for me, sometimes it's not flowing, and sometimes it's not what I want it to be. But I always enjoy the practice, and I always enjoy the process. I will put off recording intros and outros to the show, or recording any aspect of the show if I'm not just right. Yeah. And I guess that is a little different because it's my voice and it's the energy in my voice and that kind of thing. Yeah. But I will put it off if I'm not like if I'm a little hungover, I'm not about to record an intro. Yeah, you know?
You can't see this right now, but I'm sweating a lot right now. Yeah, it's a different kind of muscle memory, isn't it? Yeah. That setup. Right. And that execution in that setup.
Right. And I think I'm more forgiving of my bad ideas on paper. I don't know if you feel the same way, but like if I write something and it turns out to be shit, and even if I show it to somebody, I'm all right with it. Yeah. I don't know why that is, but I'm okay with it. If I speak it out loud, for some reason there's a different feeling about that.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I think that's also just like it's probably a different level of comfort that you have with your own writing at this point too. And if this is, I mean, you've been doing this for, you said, a year now.
Well, I hit my stride a year. Yeah. So we've done it. The first episode was recorded almost 3 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. But you've probably been writing for how many years?
Right. Forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like 25, 30 years.
Right.
So you have a different level of comfort with that. It's something that you're very, very familiar with, and probably you're very familiar and comfortable with your own voice in that. Wow. The writing voice.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. For you, there's so many places I want to go here with this. You need to do the work, you said. Mm-hmm. Is it I wake up in the morning and I just hit the ground running with it? Is it I wake up in the morning, I get my coffee, and then I hit the ground running with it? Are you finding pockets of time? Like, what is your process like in a day-to-day kind of sense?
It depends on what the project is. I used to be that person and be like, no, you write every day and you do this every time, like every morning at this time and all that. And I am that person. I am that writer at certain times of the year. Huh. I found that I work on fiction in the fall. In the fall, I'll work on a manuscript for probably 3 or 4 months, a new draft. Mm-hmm. In the spring, I edit a lot, and I'll still write some short stuff. I'll write some nonfiction in the spring, but for some reason I'm like a seasonal.
That's so interesting. Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. I used to try and work on fiction year round, and I could, like if I were working on like a short story collection or something like that. Yeah. But now that I'm almost exclusively working on novels, I find that I have to work on them in a concentrated space, and space meaning time this time. Mm-hmm. But I have to work on them in like a 3 to 4 month window for a new draft. And I'll still write to that additionally if I need to in the spring as part of the editing process. Yeah. And I still work at the same time. Right. But that's when I find that I'm able to really focus on getting like a voice to be consistent is if I'm able to do it in a condensed window.
Huh. So, but why not the spring? Why is it
I don't know. It's like, why do people suffer seasonal affective disorder? You know, like
yeah, but I get that sense, right? Because of the light, you know. I mean, some of that and the weather and that kind of thing. But I wonder if that is like a throwback to school. And you teach now anyway?
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that factors into it, my workload. But I'm actually busier in the fall than I am in the spring with my work.
Oh, interesting.
Because I teach so many composition classes and so many students in the fall.
Yeah.
Because of course, when all the incoming freshmen are there.
Right.
But yeah, for some reason that's the way it's worked out, and I've discovered that over the past, and I guess that's just part of like realizing who we are in our creative work.
Right.
I've realized that over the past like 3 years.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. I used to try and do it year round.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still write year round,
Sure.
but I'll write different things at different times of the year.
There's something back to that idea of comfort, and we talked about comfort in physical space, but that comfort in time that all right, it's your brain knows, all right, it's go time.
Yeah.
Now's manuscript time. And then it knows, hey, now's editing time.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. And I think that's, getting in that rhythm, because there are lots of other types of disciplines where you're kind of a system forces you in that space, right? So like training camp is at this particular time, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like you have your own little training camp and your own regular season and then your own kind of off season, so to speak.
Because you probably realize that there are things that you feel better working on at different times of the year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you kind of let yourself tune into that.
Yeah.
I mean, our bodies are different sizes at different times of the year. Our brains are probably affected by that too.
Yeah.
Definitely by the heat and everything as well.
Right.
But yeah, I edit, write some nonfiction, and map for the next project at this time of year. And then over the summer, I'll probably end up doing a residency. And I'll probably try and finish kind of like mapping, character development type of stuff then. And then about August, I'll ramp up and start writing. August or September, usually about end of August, beginning of September.
Can you talk about that a little bit, the mapping process and what that looks like?
It looks different. With every book for me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I almost draw a different map. So on one, it's, I mean, you have the same things that you're going for. You're still going for a certain amount of tension. You're going for different developments in plot in different places. Different things that you feel like kind of have to happen in the story to keep it moving along and to keep the reader going. But like Alligator Zoo Park Magic was, that was a totally different map because, in that one you have the book broken up into 3 sections and you have, you still have some things that need to happen early in the book to be able to set things up for the rest of it. But that map looked a little different. If we're talking about the physical appearance of the map, sometimes I've drawn like power lines and things like that. But I also tend to draw whenever I'm mapping. And so, on that one, like I drew like birds and stuff on the power lines, like, you start kind of drawing in things that you see happening at different points in the story. For the next one, I've done like 3-4 maps for this one so far because I'd already written. Golly, I'm getting like way ahead of myself. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I've got the manuscript I'm editing right now was really clean.
Okay.
It was a super linear process for writing this book.
Yeah.
So the editing hopefully will be fairly easy. I had a really tight map for this one. I felt like I had the right things in the right places for that. And then for the one that I'm going to work on in the fall, it's been a nightmare.
Really?
I've already written this book once, and it was terrible. It was
What? Wait, what?
It was like
What?
almost 80,000 words, and it was just totally amorphous. Like, it was a mess.
Why? What happened?
It just got out of my control
Uh-huh.
because of a lack of the organization in it.
Interesting.
Because of that lack of structure.
Yeah.
And like, that's going back to the idea of having like these parameters, having this structure in place so that you can be creative.
Yeah.
If it's unwieldy, if you don't have some of that structure in place, you just go all over the place.
How did you not? Because I'm picturing you going through that process, and
I know.
how did you not be like, oh fuck, man, this ain't working? Or
You know,
were you just into it? You were just in love with it, or
my
what?
wife telling me that.
Really?
Yeah. I I feel terrible. I pawned off the manuscript on her. I like hand her this stack of pages, and she starts going through it, and she's an awesome editor.
Oh, okay.
And so she is
That's
going
great.
through and like just marking these pages up, and she gets like 25 pages in. No, she probably got further in than that. I'm trying to give myself some credit here. And she hands them back to me, and she's like, this doesn't work. I just kept like adding in more shit.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't give myself the kind of structure that I needed. And so now, I mean, I scrapped that whole thing.
Damn.
And I had to completely change the idea. I changed the setting. I changed, oh God.
What'd you keep?
I stripped out so much. Very basic premise.
Oh, really?
Just the very basic premise. Yep. Everything else is gone.
So from like base level, right? So your idea generation, where is that? Are you writing down just a line? Is it just coming to you? Are you doing the work and you think of the basic premise? Like, where does that come from?
So Joel Didion had this awesome essay on keeping a journal, and the importance of that and what the purpose of it is. I see on your table over here, you've got like probably 70 journals stacked up.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes, like she said, it's a snippet of a conversation, or it's just a random thing that you see that becomes something.
Right.
These random ideas become bigger ideas. They expand and they expand and they grow.
Yeah.
As long as we catch them.
Yeah.
So really, it's all about making sure that. Oh God, I lost a journal one time,
Dude.
and it was I've lost two, but I found one of them.
Dude.
But the one that I lost, I was riding a bicycle,
Dude.
around St. Augustine, and it fell out of my back pocket, gone forever.
People who listen to this show regularly right now are screaming at their computer box.
Really?
Because they're like, that's the same fucking story for me, man.
Really?
I went to our good friend Hannah Harbor, who was episode 18 of this show.
Uh-huh.
I went to her CD release party.
Yeah.
And had this great time. I had a couple of beers.
Yeah.
And I was riding with some friends and having good music. And it's beer drinking fucking music.
Yep.
You know?
It happens.
She's got songs about, hurtful stuff and love and stuff. But anyway, all the stuff that makes me drink. And I was riding home. And we have a lot of cobblestone streets in Orlando, something that people don't really know about this town. As we just discussed earlier, it's a misunderstood town. There's a lot of cobblestone streets. I must have had it in my back pocket. Yep. And dude, I had an idea. I had written a lot of this story, and I know the story, right?
Yeah.
Like I know it,
but still.
But I felt good about where it was going, and it's really a true story. It's my dad's story that I'm just retelling, and adding my flavor to, and it's a great fucking story, and I just can't. It's like I can't get there anymore.
Doesn't that kill you?
And I put it up, and people will see me sometimes now because I put up on social media on the Facebook event. If anybody sees this journal, I had this idea. If anybody sees it, please. And I always put my name and like email and stuff on the inside, but it's just gone.
Yeah.
And I'll see people and they'll be like, especially like musician friends and writer friends, I'll see them and they'll ask me about it.
Yeah.
And their faces just drop when they find out I still haven't found it.
I feel like we all have, especially if we're carrying a pocket journal like that. And it was one of the thinner ones like that. It wasn't like right now I have kind of like a thicker one, so I know it's there.
Yeah.
And I've kind of made that transition since I lost that one.
Oh,
it was scarring.
Yeah.
Like because I've gotten better about making sure that I'm transcribing. Like as I go through a journal, I sit down and I cross out the pages as I put them into the computer, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because of that.
That's great.
Because I hadn't done that to any of those pages in that journal.
That's great.
Yeah, that's been good, because then it gives me some peace of mind. Like if it does, if I drop it next to the bed and it gets pushed under it or something like that, and I'm like, oh, where's my journal? I'm like, well, at least I know I transcribed, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's great. That's really disciplined too, though. That's a little bit of extra work.
It is. I mean, but if you're sitting down to write anyway,
Sure.
it takes what, 5 to 10 minutes?
Sure, good point. And you're processing the language in a different way too, and processing the idea.
Yep.
You're wrestling with it differently. It looks different when it's typed out than when it's written on a page.
Yep.
Half the stuff in those journals you just referenced, I haven't looked at in forever.
Yeah, and I definitely have some that I didn't do that too. But when are you ever gonna do it?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, is there gonna be some week in the future where Jason Earle sits down and goes through every journal?
Man,
on the
I hope
desktop?
so. I hope so. And I hope all the tears that I cry and all of the excitement that I feel and all of the boners I get and all of the...
Those are noted in there?
I mean to say this process is going to elicit all of this.
Hopefully you weren't drawing pictures.
There's no pictures of boners in any of those journals, I promise. Immediately burns all journals. Kicks CH hooks out of the house.
Yeah, get out of here. You exposed my shame.
Oh man. I did want to talk about your book.
I think we've gotten into way more interesting sources material at this point.
Which I love. I know I've told you I love it. I do love it.
Oh man.
And I love the characters, and I think talk about place. I mean, and I think the book would resonate with anybody, because I think there are, of course, universal themes, and everybody knows. And that's the all great art, of course, you can connect to, because you can see people and yourself in it, and you understand it in certain ways. But it's very, like, when you read about mermaids in the tank, I mean, if you grew up in Florida, and immediately Wiki Wachi comes to mind, if I could go on and on and on about the references in the book where it's just like, I know all these motherfuckers, all these motherfuckers. And I grew up in Ocala, kind of middle class upbringing in Ocala, so it was like I knew all of this stuff. Like these characters aren't living the same life that I did, but I knew all those folks. And it's a weird thing in a town like Ocala, where even in sort of the middle class areas of Ocala, all of the shit, like the van racing kind of stuff that happens in the book, and I don't want to go too deep because I want people to read this book, but the van racing kind of stuff, and the dynamics between the city folk, right? The guys come down from Jacksonville, the big city, Jacksonville being the laughing stock of the rest of the country, right? Like everyone looks at us at Jacksonville as like these rednecks. The NFL thinks that we're just a ridiculous place and that we should fall into the sea and be transported to London. The team should be transported to London. And we think of it as the big city. But that dynamic, where the city boys come and the city boys are country boys,
Yeah, still, yeah, of course.
There's so much about place that speaks to it, and I do wonder, like, with your writing in general, are you thinking writing what you know, or are you just writing what you know naturally?
I think we all have different experiences, right? That inform our creativity. Like back to the discussion that we were having about that. I think that it's unavoidable that we write from experience. We don't necessarily write the experience.
Right.
But we're writing from experience. We're writing from things that we've been exposed to or bumped into or seen or heard or felt. Those are the things that inadvertently or on purpose kind of seep into our material. So yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily I was intentional about writing the book, but I don't know that it was necessarily me trying to always pull from a personal experience. It was just more of a kind of pool of experience that everything kind of had fallen into over years and years and years of living.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you're not consistently eating mushrooms and drinking beers while driving around in a van? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I don't feel like I can answer that question.
Oh, man.
After this, we're going to go outside and have a race.
I'm ready. I got my Sentra. It's got a spoiler.
I wish I would have brought the Subaru down here. They're like a green Subaru Outback that's nearly toast.
Oh, my God. We clearly share a couple of mutual loves. Pete's, is that the Pete's Bar in Atlantic Beach?
So
that you mentioned in the acknowledgments.
Yeah, I mentioned a few different bars that I spent time in, and while I was writing it.
Okay,
for sure.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
So, like for me, one of my favorite things to do is go to the bar and read or write.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm finding I'm having trouble with, and I'm not complaining. It's a nice problem to have, but like I've got my regular bars, and I've gotten to the point now where like for the most part, of course, people are respectful because they're my friends or at least acquaintances.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to be able to find, and I don't know if it's just this town, maybe. I think it's just this town where it's hard to find a place where you can just have alone time. And I don't mean that as a bad thing because people are great here, but I felt like I could go to, and Pete's wasn't really my spot, but in Riverside and Jacksonville, for example, there were several bars I could go to, and just even if I knew people, I could kind of be anonymous and sit at the end of the bar and do my writing. I guess Pete's is a different place because nobody's gonna fuck with you really.
I would do a lot of reading in there.
Okay.
Or like a lot of, I wouldn't go into Pete's with my computer.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't like sit there and type out a lot, but I would sit there and just kind of like take in the experience. And be able to be in a dark space in the middle of the day.
Yeah, I think it's important to set that
done.
scene, right?
Yeah.
So for folks who haven't been to Pete's, it's a pool hall, really.
Yeah.
It's a cash-only bar,
Right.
assuming it's still cash-only.
Yeah,
It's been there a billion years.
Yeah.
It's in Atlantic Beach, which is in the Jacksonville. It's in Duval.
You can buy booze to go.
Yeah. It's kind of, and you'll see everything from a frat guy to an old man to everybody in between. It's definitely one of those equalizing kind of bars.
Yeah.
Which is part of what I think everyone loves about it, right?
Right.
Is that like we're all on the same level there. I mean,
It's one of the oldest bars in that area. Too.
Yeah, it's got to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that I would go to, I'd go to Flask and Cannon out there,
I don't know that
Jack's Beach, and then also Pose.
Yeah,
because Pose is really, really dark.
Yeah.
And you can get a booth there and just sit there, and that is somewhere that I would take my computer.
So is darkness a prerequisite for you?
No, because Flask and Cannon isn't dark.
Okay.
It's actually really bright. It's almost like it's kind of like a tiki bar type of concept, but it's more about being left alone. And that's kind of where I think you were going some too. It's like being able to have that kind of space around you and just be left alone to think.
Right.
That's the most important thing.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just like even some background noise is good.
It is.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now I do struggle with if there's something about my hearing, like if I'm in a place where there is a loud conversation going on.
I can't do coffee shops.
Yeah.
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 People talk less at a bar usually.
Yeah. I will get locked into whatever is happening. And
People go to coffee shops for business meetings now.
Right.
It's like where they go to like try and sell somebody on an idea.
Right.
And I can't listen to that.
Right.
It'll make me go crazy. I'm too cynical.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that space, and now I don't know where that space is for me, because like I had a spot that I still my spot, and I can
don't name it on there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I've got my spot. If you have some time later, we might drop by there on the way out of town or something. And I love it, but it used to be when Chris and I first started dating, I would come down on the weekends, and she is the general manager of a wine bar.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so she would work at night, and I worked during the day, and so then on the weekends, we would just get as much time as we could in together.
Yeah.
But at night, she would be working.
Right.
So I would go find a place to either do my day job work or do some writing and reading. And when I first came to town, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
So that was prime time. I was so fucking productive.
Yeah.
All my friends were in Jacksonville.
Right.
Right. And I was here waiting for my lady to get off work.
You're like, I'm so lonely, but I'm so productive.
But I'm so productive. I got sick. What else are you going to do? Fret about dying, you know, like otherwise I'm just gonna sit around freaking out about my existence, you know.
This is a crisis.
Yeah. I gotta do something with this energy. So I find myself at some of these bars, and I found the cool ones are the ones that I thought were cool, you know.
Yeah.
Ones that I vibed with. But now I know all those people. So like if I go to Ocean Sun Brewing, for example, which I love. I just end up talking sports with the guys, right? That's my sports place where I can go and talk sports. If I go to Barley and Vine, then that's all my friends, you know, and that's where
you need an antisocial bartender.
Mm-hmm. If anybody's listening to this and you know of a good spot in Orlando where I can get a decent beer, because I am kind of picky about my beers, and an antisocial bartender.
There we go.
Yeah, let me know.
Yep. Yeah, I think there should be a solid comment section on this.
Yeah, this is. I mean, that's pretty much why I invited you over, was to get to
get to the comments.
Get to the comments. Find me a space to create. This is about me, buddy. You write this beautiful book. Blah blah blah.
We've got dicks and journals.
I could just see like 5 years from now, I finally have that time, and I'm going through that, and I'm like, son of a bitch, there is a dick in this journal.
Amazing.
Yeah. Man, gosh, we still haven't talked about the book.
That's all right.
Matt Vasquez too. I want to talk about Matt Vasquez because
Okay.
you quote Delta Spirit in there. Are you just a big Delta Spirit fan, or do you know Matt?
No, I don't know him. That song St. Francis, and really it was just, for me, I always have music that goes along with what I'm writing.
Awesome.
I keep, like, I write it down while I'm thinking about it. There are certain songs that can put me back into the mental space of, like, that I identify with a landscape in a book, or that I identify with an emotion, or that I identify with a time period in a book that I'm working on, or and so for me, St. Francis by Delta Spirit was kind of the embodiment of the emotion that I was feeling in this book.
Oh, dope.
So I wrote him and just asked him if I could have permission to use that, and he was like, sure.
Yeah, of course he was. He was episode 12 of this show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you've been
that's
on the
amazing.
same show as Matt
No way.
Vasquez,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sent him a book over in Oslo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Matt, if you're out there, I
Yeah.
hope you got the book.
It's funny, he and I talk on, I don't mind saying this because we talked about it in person. He's such a brilliant songwriter.
Yeah.
I mean, such a beautiful songwriter. His emails are indecipherable. And not only him, John Snodgrass too. Are you familiar with John Snodgrass?
I know the name, yeah.
Okay, so John's been on the show twice now.
Okay.
He's been on once, and then there's another one that will come out before this episode.
Yeah.
And we've kind of become, buddies in that sense. And John is such a brilliant songwriter, but you can't even make heads or tails of his emails. And Matt's funny because he knows it. He spells words wrong, and there's no punctuation. But how laid back that guy is, and such a genius.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
those
he's a
records,
brilliant. Yeah.
His new solo record is fantastic.
Yeah.
Texas Murder Ballad is the EP that he put out about a year and some change ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I got the new vinyl a few weeks ago. But yeah, yeah, we were just sending notes through Facebook Messenger. Because I didn't have his email. I didn't have another way to contact him. I was just like, well, shot in the dark, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I just sent him that note. Sure, just make sure I can't remember precisely what it said, but I think there was like a smiley face.
Yeah. That's great, and it's so good. And it's interesting because none of my heroes have turned out to be assholes.
That's good.
It's been really cool in this process, meeting all these artists that I respect so much, and they always end up being really cool folks.
It's really reaffirming, I think, whenever that happens, like that. it's like okay to still like the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's huge, man, especially today as we're starting to we learn more and more about people, or at least one side of more and more about people. And that it just breaks my heart, man. The Ryan Adams shit breaks my fucking heart.
Yeah.
You know? And like honestly, it hasn't changed how I feel about the art, but it does, like, I think about it.
Yeah.
You know, when I hear the record, I think about it. Still love the music.
Right.
It's undeniably good. So I still love the music, but it's great when you meet somebody like Matt that just ends up being a cool dude.
That's rad. That's really, really cool.
What else? So what about the new stuff? What song? Can you divulge songs that are associated with the new stuff you've been working on?
So for the one that I'm working on now, really the one that I've been mapping, I've been kind of listening to a lot of old blues. So like, you know, of course Robert Johnson's in there, but then like Blind Boy, what was it, Lemon Fuller, and like stuff like that just like kind of, you know, the area where I live right now. I live in coastal Georgia, but I don't live on the Golden Isles or something. I live in Brunswick, which is, you know, we have paper mills, and it's just like kind of a depressed economy. You know, you have these sections of the city where you just see kind of generations worth of just low. And so that's kind of the feeling that I get from some of that music. And some of it's more upbeat and happy, but it's still the blues.
Yeah.
You know?
A happy blues song is still depressing as hell.
Exactly.
When you're really paying attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's still about like some level of oppression or frustration, or just like kind of getting left behind. So
I was talking about that on that note, the idea of that juxtaposition between like a happy sounding song that's actually really, really depressing. Is one of my favorite things. Like anytime there, and Alligator Zoo Park Magic does a lot of that. It's funny as hell. It's so fucking funny, but it's real depressing.
I'm sorry.
You know what I mean, though,
no,
right?
True. I mean, humor is in fiction. Like, if you've got something funny, there's something sad behind it. More than likely.
But there's also enormously uplifting moments, and there's this kind of theme of like seeking freedom, and it kind of to a large extent Jeffers is almost like what we were talking about earlier, that desire to be left alone, but at the same time be noticed and known. The tension that he kind of feels is something that I think a lot of us can really relate to,
because people are putting hope in somebody,
right?
And if you're putting hope in a human, then ultimately you're in for some disappointment.
Of course.
So, here's looking at you, Joe Biden.
Dude. Well, I mean, it's the thing. It's, you know, now we can go down this road. That was my thing with Obama, was always like, y'all pump your brakes. This guy has almost no life experience. And yes, he's very smart. Yes, he has some good ideas. But we don't know what the fuck we're getting here. And it turned out okay. But when people were getting all fired up and just latching on to the very tag word hope.
Hope, yeah.
Just the word hope is a really scary thing.
It is.
Because he could have turned out to be a lot worse.
Right.
And if he had turned out to be a lot worse, we would have been in a lot of trouble with the cult of personality that was created around him.
Anytime that we're making a human being out to be something greater than a human being.
Right.
Like, if we're putting more on them than just the fact that, you know, they're going to be flawed.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, we're in dangerous territory.
And
same thing with Ryan Adams, right?
Oh, perfect.
Like, you love the music.
Yeah.
And then you try and love the person.
Yeah.
But you have to almost be able to break that. You have to be able to almost distance the artist from the art if you want to still be able to love the art.
Man, that's really a great point. I'm looking up at that Jason Isbell poster and Jason Isbell wall hanging. Right. And there's a theme. Yeah. My press passes from Jason Isbell shows over on my guitar case. None of this is news to anybody who listens to the show, that he's my favorite artist of all time. And I think about a guy who's pretty transparent about his own shortcomings and where he's come to. But now the public persona of him, at least, that has been cultivated, is that he's kind of like a perfect person, you know?
Right.
And of course he's not, you know? and so that's an important thing to remember too, is even the people who have found redemption in some way in terms of their actions and their choices are still humans.
They're still one step away from really fucking something up.
Right. And at what point do we, I think a lot of times now when we find out these bad things about people or these things that they've done, that a lot of times the tendency is to wipe our hands of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of misguided. Like, I'm concerned about that. Even with the really heinous kind of things.
Right.
That leads to the idea of, like, this person isn't redeemable anymore.
Right.
And that's also where we get into some of these ideas about, like, felons not having their rights restored after they've served their debt to society.
Yeah. Like Florida talking about making people pay to be able to get their voting rights back, basically. Yeah.
It's very clearly a poll tax and very clearly illegal.
Yeah.
But that goes back to our great state. Where did you actually grow up?
I grew up all over South Georgia.
Okay.
Really. I was born in Florida, but grew up in South Georgia.
Okay. All right. Very similar cultures.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same though, and I think that's important too. I think if you're not from here, you might consider them to be the same idea, but they're not.
No, not entirely.
And the geography is different too. I mean, the geography here is very different from South Georgia, obviously. But that duality of the southern thing as a whole, and specifically Florida, is something that comes through in Alligator Zoo Park Magic. Those characters are really clever people. They're really, in their own way, very eloquent. But they're also redneck motherfuckers.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, and I love that juxtaposition and the way that you express it.
Yeah. I mean, throughout history, the poorest people have been the most crafty, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's necessary. Mm-hmm. You find hacks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's them.
You find hacks. I love that. I never really thought about it like that. It sort of, because of that restriction, back to the idea of having to have a restrictive either time or space, and in this case, all of the above.
Right.
To have that restriction and then to be able to make something kind of beautiful out of it. And Jefferson makes these beautiful things out of his circumstances.
Yeah, totally. No, and I think that he's desperate for getting out, like you said earlier. He's desperate for the escape. Yeah. And so he's willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah. Do you feel that sense of need for escape, you personally? Is there any of that in you?
For different things, right? At different times of life. But for me, no, I actually love it down here.
That's
like,
great.
I think the strangeness of this environment, and I don't think I'd be the same writer if I didn't love it.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't love some element of just even where I am right now. Yeah. You have to be kind of in love with that environment to be able to, I feel like, give it the due that it deserves when you're writing about it.
Right.
Yep.
Wow. That's beautiful. We've almost gone an hour. I didn't even realize that. We usually go like 30 minutes.
Oh, dang.
Well, I always like to end, though, by asking what the artist is consuming. So you mentioned blues.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Books, other music, films.
Okay. So what am I consuming? So last night...
lots and lots of booze.
After my evening, for the first time ever, and I don't think this will ever happen again, I fell asleep mid Taco Bell bean burrito in bed.
That's not safe, man.
That's like
on
smoking
so
in bed.
Yeah. On so many levels.
So, it was about 1:30 in the morning. I was eating my second Taco Bell bean burrito.
Uh-huh.
And, God, this is just awful in general.
Man.
Like, yeah.
Where did you... All right, let's briefly get into the night. So you did a reading.
I did a reading last night.
Uh-huh.
and I'd had some, I usually have like a little bit of bourbon before I go into a reading.
Okay.
And
Why?
I like bourbon.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm looking for this like profound moment.
No.
Nope. Just like bourbon. Ditto.
Oh man. And then I went to this Mexican restaurant with a buddy of mine that was reading last night too.
Taco Bell.
No. This was the first Mexican restaurant of the night.
Okay.
And got a couple margaritas, and then we I don't know where we went. We went and had drinks at just some random bar, and then got this idea that so Babe Ruth hit this like 500-foot blast or something on what used to be the fairgrounds at Tampa, which is now part of the campus of University of Tampa. So my buddy and I had this idea. He brought a bucket of baseballs and a bat, and we're like, let's go see how far from the spot that's marked we can hit a baseball.
That's amazing.
So we took this bucket of baseballs to the middle of University of Tampa's campus last night, and and started hitting baseballs. We were like, if there was a student walking by, we'd have him pitch to us.
Wow. What time is this?
It's like maybe 11 o'clock at night.
Okay.
10:30, 11 o'clock. No, yeah, it was probably about 11
This
o'clock.
is my dream evening.
And then we, security came by a couple times. You could see them kind of like, rightly so.
Yeah.
We're hitting regular baseballs in the middle of campus. Like,
Did you have a wooden bat? Did you have
no, it was a metal bat.
Like a grown-up?
Yeah, it was a 33-inch bat.
Okay, all right.
And so then we moved over to the field, like the where they have the track and everything now. And we at that point we're just like, well, let's go hit some baseballs.
That's amazing.
So, I think of all of our hits combined, because we weren't hitting very well for some reason.
I understand.
Yeah, we may have hit it as far as the Babe, but
I think that counts, right?
Cumulative.
Yeah. I call this shot and this shot and this shot and this shot and this shot after you called this shot and this shot and this shot and this shot.
Yeah. So my shoulder is in pain today.
Are you any good at baseball?
I played all growing up, and
Okay.
I love baseball.
Yeah.
I love it. Am I good now at 36 years old?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, that was my game. That was my love.
Yeah.
My passion growing up, and I was pretty good, but I wasn't. I'm 5'8".
Yeah.
I was
it's just you gotta do it because you love it.
Yeah. I'm pretty athletic, but ultimately there was a ceiling.
Yeah, me too.
And so, but it's interesting though that the game, when it ended for me, I tried to play in college, and I played for a fall semester at an NAIA Division II school.
What school?
Palm Beach Atlantic College, down in West Palm.
Yeah.
And I got cut at the end of the fall season. So they had 6 second basemen. They cut 3 of the second basemen. 2 of the other guys pitched. 1 guy was on scholarship. They didn't have room for me. And I probably wasn't really good enough, quite honestly. But it was so devastating, and I didn't know what to do because it was such a part of my life for so long. And nobody really they all told me it was going to end, but nobody said, dude, you got to find an outlet.
Right.
You need to go coach,
Yeah.
or you need to swallow your pride and join a softball league,
Yeah.
or something. And it took me years to figure out that, wait a minute, a lot of my self-destructive behavior that happened after that was because that time and energy and heart was filled with baseball.
It got taken from you.
And it got taken from me.
Yeah.
I didn't choose to leave.
Right. You're like, I'm still here.
Yeah.
You're like, you have to leave now, sir.
Yeah. Like the security last night.
Yeah, security came.
Yeah. Security. Yeah, life security came.
Yeah. Life security. I like this. This is a good concept. Life security.
Life security. We need more life security.
Yeah.
Really. Like really benevolent life security, though. Not like dickheads with badges.
Right.
They need to be dressed in a very non-threatening manner. Their uniforms need to be like flip-flops.
Those are the men in the white suits. Yeah. The walls are so gentle.
Oh man. Okay, so bean burritos. any authors? I know you and Caleb Johnson
yeah.
know each other. I got Treeborn up there.
Yeah,
I love that
yeah.
book. Caleb and I are gonna try to catch up whenever we're in the same town at some point.
Totally, and you should. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a good dude. I love if you hadn't read it, Thomas McGuane's 92 in the Shade.
Okay.
That's one of my very favorite books. It's a Florida book.
Okay.
Right now I've got just man, I have a stack of books on my nightstand. I've got George Singleton's new book, Staff Picks, that I'm hoping to get to like jump into like in the next week or so.
Yeah.
I've been reading I'm so bad with names. I'll have to get back to you on this one. It's I think it's called like not Music of the Swamp, but yeah, somebody recommended that one to me recently, and I'm like 3 chapters into it.
When you're reading a book like that, are you able to be sort of an objective fan, or are you thinking about the craft and how it relates to your work?
That's a good question. For me, I try and find books at this point that I'm not necessarily going to feel like I need to dissect.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot of Southern Lit, Wild Cash, Taylor Brown, some of that crew. But I try and find things these days that I'm not necessarily going to feel like I never want to read something that I'm going to feel like is going to make something off limits for me in my material.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to accidentally come across something that's like mirrored in some of my own work that is going to make me feel like it suddenly pushes something outside of what I'm able to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That makes a ton of sense.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've heard that from other people, like Kevin McLean, who now plays drums with Sarah Shook and the Disarmers, and was in American Aquarium. I interviewed him many years ago, and he talked about trying not to listen to too much of things that he's worried are going to permeate his work.
Yep.
And he had talked about, he's an avid cyclist, and David Byrne wrote a book, Bicycle Diaries, about his cycling around the world and that kind of thing. And I gave him a copy, but he was hesitant because he was like, I'm worried that this is going to impact. I've avoided this book because I'm a huge David Byrne fan, and I'm afraid it's going to have this other impact on me, my music and on my, my art. Otherwise, he's a photographer too.
Yeah.
And that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah.
Because I also, for me, and I haven't published a novel. I'm a guy who writes basically for me, and I put it out on Instagram, or I put it on marinadepodcast.com as, in some way, that kind of thing. And so for me, I recognize that almost every time I write something, I'm ripping off whoever I'm reading at the time. So my recent stuff probably sounds like Alligator Zoo Park Magic.
That's awesome.
It probably sounds like my bad imitation of you.
So if I'm working on a specific project, I pretty much shut it down.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I can't do that completely because of teaching.
Oh yeah.
But whenever I'm in that period of like that 3-month period, where I'm working on a new draft, it has to be completely it has to sound like me.
Yeah.
And so I cut out pretty much everything at that point. And that's why music becomes so important.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That is so interesting. And that makes a ton of sense too. Mm-hmm. Music being, especially when you talk about blues music or however you want to categorize Matt Vasquez's music, roots kind of influenced sort of stuff. It's so literary.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
It becomes almost like a stand-in for being able to read.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. That's really wonderful.
That I feel like I have to.
Yeah.
Because I don't want somebody else's voice to like, and I'm really, I'm pretty assured in what my voice is as an author at this point, as a writer, but at the same time, I'm pretty protective of that.
Yeah.
And I think I have to be.
Man, this has been such a pleasure.
Dude, I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much.
It's been an awesome conversation just hanging out.
Yeah, well, ditto. I mean, this has just been more than I could have hoped for, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
blackwater.
CH Hooks, everyone. What a wonderful conversation. I had so much fun, and I'm so grateful that he stopped by the Marinade Studios. The book is called Alligator Zoo Park Magic. You can find it on Bridge 8 Press, which is based out of my beloved Jacksonville. It's also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, all those kind of major outlets. You can find CH Hooks on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. He's fairly active over there and pretty responsive, so check him out. And also at chhooks.com. Thank you so much to everybody for listening. Thank you to Kyle Keller for sharing your gorgeous song. Kyle's our buddy. I got to see him play with our friend Jordan Foley, and it was just such a magical night. This was last week at Will's Pub. You can find Kyle on Instagram and Facebook. You can also find his music at kylekellermusic.bandcamp.com if you want to hear more of what he's doing. There was a really cool piece in the Orlando Weekly. If you go to orlandoweekly.com and just search Jordan Foley, Kyle Keller, there's a great piece about that particular night that I was fortunate enough to experience with my friends. They're doing great things, and I'm thankful that I get to see them play music on a fairly regular basis. You can find all things Marinade at marinadepodcast.com, including website-exclusive episodes, some of my concert photography, some written pieces. Check that out. There's also lots of different ways to connect with us. If you really like what we're doing, consider joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/marinadepodcast. For just a few dollars a month, you can gain access to exclusive content like our Patreon-only show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that have formed my creative life. It's a chance to dive a little bit deeper. Plus, we have a lot of fun. We end up having exchanges in the comments, and I talk about things that are I talk about some of the backstories of the shows and things that maybe I can't share normally. If that's not in your budget, if Patreon's not in your budget at the moment, I totally get it. Just tell somebody about the show. If you like what we're doing, tell somebody about the show. Subscribe on your podcast app. Give us a rating on your podcast app. Those things are all free, easy, painless things for you to do that really, really help us. All right, y'all, it's time for What I'm Getting Down On, the segment where I share the art that is inspiring me at the moment. My brain has been ADD when it comes to reading lately. I have a stack of books that I've kind of just picked at since finishing Rob Hycott's Out Past the Wires. And then finally yesterday, Voices from Chernobyl by Svetlana Alexievich, the book that Craig Mazin, the creator and writer of Chernobyl on HBO, talks about at length as being a huge piece of source material for the television show. That book finally arrived by courier from my local library, and I am tearing through it. The accounts are heartbreaking, so of course I can't get enough. If you can get your hands on a copy, do it. Just make sure you're in the right mindset, because it is pretty tough. The record I've been listening to the most at the moment, kind of a bit of a throwback to all the way back in April, Josh Ritter's Fever Breaks. It came out earlier this year, and I listened to it a few times then and loved it, but right now, I'm just rediscovering it. I was fortunate enough to get a gift card to my local record store, Park Ave CDs, and I went down there and picked up the vinyl. This record is so good. Ritter teamed up with Jason Isbell in the 400 unit on this one, and the result is incredible. I also recently learned of Cat Clyde's Hunter's Trace album. You can find that wherever you consume music. It is bluesy and soulful. There's a depth to her vocals, and it's a lyrically strong record. That's Cat Clyde's Hunter's Trace. Really been getting down on that. And I finally saw A Star Is Born. That's the other piece of art that's really been inspiring. It just moved me on so many levels. And I'm not really sure exactly why it hit me. Other than I think, we've talked a lot about on this show about addiction and how that has impacted my family for generations. And so there's the marriage of sort of that really, really tough subject with music, especially great music. That film is just full of incredible music and incredible acting. It just had me in tears. I mean, throughout the film. I can't say enough about it. It took me too long to get to it, but I'm glad I got to it when I did, right? So we're ready for art whenever Whenever we're ready for art, it comes to us, and I'm so glad that I found it at the moment that I did. It's given me a lot to think about, and it moved me in a major way. Y'all, thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much to CH Hooks for all your time and support. Thank you to Kyle Keller for sharing your amazing music. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, go out and create something.